It's like another family, and it's relationships as well. It's not just the music. It's like you form a bond, like a stupidly close bond with the people that you play music with. And that's another big part about choosing the right person as well. Like, you don't want them to just assimilate into the music. You want them to assimilate into the friendship circle. So, like, it's kind of like, you know, any other friendship or relationship. If it's not working, it's probably time to pull the pin.
Started probably about 5 years ago. Jamie and me had just recently met and had pretty much the identical music tastes. So we met at a propaganda show, and you know, we realised that we were the same person essentially. And so we wanted to start a band together as well, and he's just like, as soon as he heard that, he was like, may as well just ask him to join. We've had issues with drummers over the years. Drummers never seem to stick around. First we had David Rudman, and he was a little bit different. He wasn't quite in that scene at all. He didn't fit. He knew he didn't fit, and so he decided to leave, and we got in a friend of ours called Dan Faro. He was really good. He fit so well. He was an amazing drummer, but it wasn't exactly the style of music he liked. So another year goes by, and we finish off our second EP. He leaves the band, and we get in Stu, who actually recorded that EP, and he's still our drummer today. Our singer Dave Parker, who had a very distinctive voice, is a very distinctive character. He's a big guy, big voice, and he left at the end of last year. He'd already mentioned to Brent in passing a few times that he was thinking about jumping ship on the band because he just couldn't handle it anymore. We haven't really had issues with people not enjoying hanging out with us as a band, so we're always, I feel like we're pretty welcoming when we have somebody come in and they get to know us and they enjoy it. So
I didn't know who any of them were except for Brent, and he seemed really friendly when I first met him, and I was like, oh my god, are these guys just going to be like these sexist douchebags and just be like ogling at me and being like, yeah, she can't sing and blah, 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 and be really just assholes, like what you expect like rock stars to be, like, you know what I mean? Like band guys, everyone's like, oh, those band wankers. But no, it was kind of like coming into someone else's home. Like, you don't know, like if you're house sitting, for example, you don't know like what you can touch or where you can go, or if you can go in this cupboard, or like, you know, what you can do. Like, I felt really restricted in some aspects.
we held tryouts for the vocal position. We'd had a few people in, and it was one of those things where we weren't stoked on anybody yet. We all had a fairly specific sort of idea in mind for a vocalist, and somebody who was more aggressive, more gruff. Like, we were all thinking some sort of like half hardcore vocalist in a way. She came in, and the first song we played with her was Home, and she added her own little melodies to bits and like sort of made it her own song, and immediately me and Jamie turned to each other while we were playing the song and just went, this is exactly what we're after.
Yeah, it was really good. Like, I felt straight away, I was like, yeah, I can fit into this band. Like, this is really cool. Like, it's not what I expected it to be at all.
I get the feeling that I'm missing out. It's on the tip of my tongue and the words just won't come out. Always ask so much more of myself.
It's totally changed, like completely. Like now if you play a show in the city, like in the city of Melbourne, you've got to be playing a huge room. Like, you've got to be playing like the Hi-Fi, Max Watts, what it's called now. That was a smart name change. Same thing with the Corner, even though it's not technically in the city, like that's still like 800-900 capacity. There's nothing else in between that, and it just starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas like back, like 10 years ago, there were a whole bunch of different rooms in the city that would be like, like anywhere between like 200 to 400 people, especially the Art House. Like, when the Art House shut down, that was like the biggest blow to the Melbourne music scene ever. Like, it was pretty much like plucking the heart out of the Melbourne music community.
Well, when we first started, one of our first aims was to play a show at the Art House, which was it was a bit of an institution. We played there once, and that was a venue that only all the money they took was from over the bar. All the money that was made on the door was split between the bands, and that sort of thing, it doesn't happen too much at the moment. When we had Parker, his voice was at a lower register, so a lot of the songs we had before we can't really use anymore. It's not really a feeling of loss, it's more a feeling of we have to force it to move forward. Like every band who plays generally ditches their old material fairly quickly as soon as they get something that they feel is better. And we feel what we're writing now is better anyway. We feel like we're pretty similar, but we know we're going to be perceived differently. Because going from a male singer to a female singer is a huge change in any way. When we first announced our first show back, we were a little bit worried, what if people come and then they end up being bored because they don't know the words to any of the songs. They only know 3 of the songs at most, and that's if they've listened to the new one we released.
It sounds fickle, but it's just got to be good. When you change singers, you're changing such a huge part of the band's identity. People become really attached to bands. That's the thing. That's why people love music. They form an attachment to it. They form a bond with it. So when you take the voice away from that, that's going to be people's attitude. It's going to be, well, they better be good.
I mean, just singing it and having people singing it back, I was like, oh, you're doing it. I was like, it was so good. It was an amazing experience. It was something that I'll never forget. And there was this one point we were playing Time and Place, which is the last song of our set that night. And there was this little girl up the front, I remember, and I was singing and I stuck my arm out. I don't know what I was doing, pointing, but she reached out and grabbed my hand. I was like, oh, I was like a fan. I was like, this is great. And it was the energy, it was so good. It was one of those moments that I'll never forget. That was like, if I can get that to happen every show, I will. I'll try my hardest to get someone to be that, enthused and, into the song that they want to touch me and grab my hand.
You got to be a bit more personal. You got to be in people's faces to a degree. People will pay attention to you if you're bringing a crowd and you prove it to them. You don't need to be a good band. You just need to be able to bring people. You need to be able to and that's the progression of being a local band as well. You got to kind of prove. You got to earn your stripes. You got to work your way up, and that's part of it. You build a fan base and you start to get more people in there, and a lot of that is just fucking harassing the shit out of people.
Come on, don't leave me hanging, ready? Whoa, whoa. Oh, come on!
What draws us together is just, I think this is the fact that we all get along, and that we all want the same thing. We all want to be successful. We all want the world to hear our music, and we come to practice every week. I think if there was one member that wasn't as dedicated as the rest, it would just, it would all crumble.
Generally, we fight. We have in band practice fights all the time. It's just one of those things where it's sort of like being in a family. You can punch on with somebody, but then 10 minutes later you'll be fine. It sort of becomes part of your identity in a way. It sounds a bit wanky, but it becomes part of what you do. I can't see myself not in the band in a way, because I've been doing it for 5 years and we've just grown accustomed to doing it every week, going into practice, jamming with each other, and then looking forward to going on a tour.
Being on stage and performing with people that I love and that I get along with really well, that share my interests, is just performing in general. It gives you such a thrill. It's, you'll play for 40 minutes and it'll go by and feel like 2 minutes, and that's when you've had the best time.
So if you're not enjoying it, then there's no fucking point. It's really no point. If you're not having fun playing music, then don't fucking play music. Go be a fucking accountant or some shit.